Welcome back. Conservatives have suffered a major defeat this week after Dan Kelly lost his second statewide bid for a seat on the Supreme Court. He was appointed in 2016 and then lost in 2020, then losing again this past week. Now, discussing all of this and the results of the election, the State Republican Party's Executive Director, Mark Jefferson, joins me now. Mark, good morning.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So it's not a pleasant question to answer, but what do you feel went wrong for, conservatives in Wisconsin this past week?
Well, I think we see a little bit of a continuation of what we've seen in November. Conservatives and Republicans, especially, are able to turn out the base, but we're struggling with messaging to independent voters, and we've lost swing voters now for a few years, and we're going to have to work on messaging to them, reaching out to them, and really talking about how the Republican solutions are better solutions for them. I think we failed in that in recent years, and we're going to have to get better at it as a party. That involves, to some degree, state party operations, but it also involves our campaigns and our candidates connecting with people. All of those things matter. Campaigns matter.
When you say Republican messaging, what specifically about the message, about the platform needs to change when you're talking to voters?
Well, I think it's less about the platform than it is about the issues of the day. The Democrats, of course, made a very big issue out of abortion, and people not only didn't see the response from the Republicans, but they didn't see many ads at all. So I think it's two-pronged. I think the message and the unity behind the message from our side has been left wanting. I think people needed to hear about how the Democrats really are very extreme on this issue. And, when we talk about them not supporting any restrictions on abortion, whether it's gender selection, due date abortions, really no restrictions up until the time of birth, I don't think those are mainstream views that the average Wisconsinites will support either. And so we need to be able to talk about that with people, and we needed to have a unified solution on our side. And we couldn't agree as to how to handle that issue, and I think it cost us. I'm pro-life. I'm proud that my party is the pro-life party that values the sanctity of life. And I think we need to better defend ourselves, not only on this issue, but other issues. I think we need to talk about crime. I think we need to talk about education reform and how the Democrats' agenda of cutting back dramatically on school choice, which has given low-income families hope and a way out of failing schools. Our solutions really meet their families' needs better than the Democrats, but we haven't had effective messaging, and we haven't been able to get it in front of people.
How would you, and I think part of this answer might be a little bit overlap, but how would you assure the Republicans across Wisconsin that your party is going to come up with a winning strategy in time for the next major election?
Well, I think the Republican Party of Wisconsin is very effective at turning out its base voters. I think in the future, we as a party, and that includes our voters, have to take some things into consideration, whether it's candidate recruitment and candidate effectiveness, their ability to win, their ability to fundraise, their ability to get that message out, because the party has a role, a very important one, and that is the role of turning out its people, turning out the hard Republicans. The party can play a role in winning those independent voters over as well, but it does come to candidate, and it comes to electability as well. I'll give you an example. Take a look back at the November elections. Ron Johnson won that race because he won enough independents. The base turned out enough for him to win, and he was very strong. He had ads up. He was defining his opponent. He was outlining his accomplishments. We won a state treasurer's race that I think gets overlooked a lot. The message from that race was you had a Republican and a Democrat, both working the state very hard, both meeting people from one end of the state to the other. The Republican won because we turned out enough votes for a Republican to win. In the campaigns where we were beaten on messaging and money, we lost. But enough Republican votes were turned out to win. And these Republican candidates have to win over those moderate swing voters as well. It's not just a base-on-base election, as a lot of us have been telling ourselves over the last few years.
Do you think the party made a mistake in backing a guy for Supreme Court that already lost a statewide election in 2020?
I think the 2020 election was unusual for a number of circumstances, right? You had the onset of COVID You had a massive mail-in vote because there was less voting in person. You had a presidential primary. The electorate at that time was 60% Republican, or 60% Democrat, excuse me, because there was a primary on the Democrat side. There was no primary on the Republican side. So I think people looked at it and said, look, if it's 60-40 Democrat in the electoral turnout because of this Democrat primary, it wasn't really a fair fight for Dan Kelly. So they were willing to give him a pass on that one. This one is a little bit interesting and a little bit different in the sense that I think the generic ballot was fairly even, but we were overmatched with the spending. We were overmatched with the messaging, especially to those swing voters.
Mark, I really appreciate you being willing to come on and tackle some tough questions with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, thank you. We will be right back.